If you hadn't seen already, a Muslim apologist by the name of MENJ. I just want to make sure I get that right, especially after his last video.
It's not supposed to be pronounced menj. It's supposed to be pronounced MENJ because it's an acronym. It's not supposed to be a noun.
He basically came out and declared war against David Wood.
Everyone knows that David is a psychopath. He bludgeoned his father and was admitted to a mental asylum for several years. However, I have decided that it is time for me to take up arms against him and to face him with my knowledge on Islam and comparative religion in general. I have decided to officially declare my opposition towards David Wood and his channel X17 Apologetics.
Now, I think it's safe to say that this battle was over before it ever even began, but nevertheless, over on his original video, which I'll pin down in the comment section below, he makes an argument surrounding Isaac and his wife Rebekah that I actually wanted to take a look at. In this comment, you'll basically see how he tries to prove that Rebekah was no more than 3 years old when she was married to Isaac. Let's check it out. Alright, so here he writes, the following scriptural facts are used to establish Rebekah's age at her marriage to Isaac. Point 1. Sarah was 90 when Abraham was 100. Point 2. Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born. Point 3. Sarah died at age 127. Point 4. Isaac was 40 when he married Rebekah. 2 further facts are necessary inferences from the above 4 facts. Point 5. Sarah was 90 when Isaac was born, which is the conclusion from points 1 and 2 above. Point 6 is that Isaac was 37 when his mother Sarah died, because 127 minus 90 is 37. Point 7 is that Abraham was informed of Rebekah's birth when Sarah was 127. Point 8 is that since Isaac was 37 at his mother's death, he was 37 when Rebekah was born. And then finally point 9, I don't know why he wrote 8 again, since Isaac was 40 when he married Rebekah, Rebekah would be 3 when the marriage took place, because 40 minus 37 is 3. Assumptions, assumptions, assumptions. These are more often than not the culprit in situations like these, and so the obvious question to ask ourselves would be, well, what assumptions are at play here? And the most prominent of the many that MENJ is already making is that he's assuming that the binding of Isaac, the birth of Rebekah, and the death of Sarah all occurred within relatively the same time frame. Now, if this were the case, I believe that MENJ's argument and his critique would be credible. But the real question we have to ask ourselves is this the case? Could we, for example, say that Rebekah was born at roughly the same time that Sarah died? Well, let's have a look at the text. First, we can see that nowhere does the text indicate the age of Isaac at the time of his binding. We know that he couldn't have been older than 37 because that would have been the age at which Sarah died, which we know occurred chronologically after the time of his binding. Additionally, the text refers to him as a lad, the Greek word of which is na'ar, which can mean a child, boy, or young man. So right off the bat, we can discredit MENJ's argument that there was a major gap between the two, but we still need to answer the question regarding Rebekah, because I would still agree with him that even a young boy, trying to marry a 3-year-old is completely unacceptable. So let's keep going. It's very important to note that there's also a passage of time between the binding of Isaac and Abraham receiving the message regarding the births. Genesis 22:19 says that Abraham dwelt in Beersheba. For how long, we don't know, but there's not enough there to assert that the events were back to back. Third, even if we assume the events were back to back, paying very close attention to the text will actually show us that Rebekah's birth wasn't even part of the original piece of news. Now it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, indeed, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor, Huz his firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Edom, Jesed, Hazo, Bildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begot Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Here we can see that the message which came to Abraham was not announcing the birth of Rebekah, but of her father Bethuel and all of his siblings, meaning that much time had to have passed for all of them to even be produced. But how old Bethuel was at the time of the announcement, as well as how old he was when he had Rebekah, are both unclear. But there's not exactly enough here to assert that Rebekah was born once the announcement was given. Even more, because we now know that Rebekah's birth was not part of the original announcement, we can then assume that was part of what Moses wrote in order to emphasize Bethuel's importance, since he knew that Rebekah would be the one to marry Isaac later down the line. We can especially see this as well in Genesis 24 when Abraham gives a charge to his servant to find Isaac a wife. Abraham doesn't know who this person will be. That's why he asks the servant to find the person, not by name, but just someone who fits the criteria. And in doing so, the servant has to pray for divine guidance as well, showing that neither of them knew who Rebekah was, meaning that if this were part of the announcement back in Genesis 22, there would be no need for Abraham to be asking the servant to go find someone if they already knew in mind that it would be Rebekah. So MENJ's argument that Rebekah's birth was announced at this time in Genesis 22 really just falls flat. One, because the text doesn't suggest it, and then two, we neither see it within the knowledge of the characters as well, even if it's indirectly. MENJ's main misstep here is to assume that all of the people born in the announcement had been born recently, and that Rebekah was also included among them. We've already shown that Rebekah was not included in the original announcement. But then two, having 8 people born from one mother all at the same time is humanly impossible. And not only that, it's completely illogical. Because if, according to MENJ, Rebekah was born at the time of the announcement, and then 3 years later, she was 3 years old at the time of her marriage to Isaac, that would include everyone else in the announcement as well, meaning that all of the other 8 siblings, including her own father, were born at the same time she was, meaning that both her father and Rebekah are the same exact age. Are you really, you're MENJ, your ship is sinking, man. Aside from all this, MENJ's theory, if it can even be called such, gets completely decimated with just a simple reading of the text. Genesis 24:15. And it happened, before he had finished speaking, that behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her pitcher on her shoulder. Verse 17. And the servant ran to meet her and said, Please let me drink a little water from your pitcher. So she said, Drink, my lord. Then she quickly let down her pitcher to her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking. Then she quickly emptied her pitcher into the trough, ran back to the well to draw water, and drew for all his camels. Now, if that's a 3-year-old doing those things, then I'm going to be needing a gym regiment from her, because that is insane. And so now that that's that, the real question is why we're even here in the first place. Muslims raise this objection in an effort to defend their own prophet and their texts, which explicitly state that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl. It was narrated from Aisha that the Messenger of Allah married her when she was 6 years old and consummated the marriage with her when she was 9. If that's not enough, as you might have guessed, Aisha hadn't even reached puberty yet. I used to play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. When Allah's Messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. The playing with the dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty. Unfortunately, MENJ, while your argument has no legs left to stand on, those 2 passages alone have been enough to create countless ex-Muslims who've been bold enough and honest enough to do some serious digging and questioning about your prophet. And I pray that the same happens to you. I sincerely do. But next time, before you decide to go to war, well, to put it in the words of Jesus, what king going to make war against another king does not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? I know you're not a Christian, but you should probably take his advice.